Hey, we're back. This time we're going to be taking a look at RWBY Combat Ready. It's from Rooster Teeth Games and Arcane Wonders. Based on the anime, I don't care if you want to call it a cartoon, anime, whatever. It's made by a Japanese guy. It's an anime to me. But it has the characters from Team RWBY as well as Penny in there. And they're taking on various villains from throughout the show in a kind of like a one-on-one duel, and then you have cards off to the side that represent other events that are taking place. And we'll get right in and take a look. The box is filled pretty much right to the top. First thing we have here is the rulebook. It's a nice full-color rulebook. It does tell a few of the rules in kind of a weird order, but they basically, they go over them as they would come up during a game, so once you've played, it's pretty easy to figure out the basics at least, but it can be confusing at first. Then they have a neat two-page section on the back about the making of the game and shows you some early prototypes and things from along the way. Next we have our scenario book, and this explains a few of the different objective cards here that come with the game. It tells you how to set up scenarios based on the villain that you're going to be facing. You have Roman Torchwick, Adam, and Cinderfall there. And it gives you suggestions for easy, medium, and hard objectives to go with those. And then depending on the number of players you have, you're going to have multiples of those objectives per game. It also explains how to use the minions and the sub-bosses, which are actually an add-on. They don't come in the base game. As well as rules for, optional rules for making things more difficult. There's rules for playing with a player actually playing as the bad guys. So it doesn't have to be a completely co-op game. You can turn it into a one versus many game. And then they also have 5-player co-op rules, so you can play all 5 of the main characters, as well as a PvP, like straight up dueling rules, which are kind of cool. On the last page is samples of actual campaigns laid out with various scenarios and things based on your number of players and difficulty there. Bunch of them already made for you, plus you can mix and match and design your own. They have a section talking about campaigns, and a little reference sheet on the back. Next thing we have is our game board. And this one, I'm not sure why they chose to do it, but it folds backward instead of forward. Normally your graphics fold on the inside of the board, that way you don't have to worry about it getting scuffed up in the box. So a lot of people were reporting that they had scratched and scuffed boards. Just an odd thing to have it fold that direction. Just strange. They do offer this board now as an add-on you can buy, and it has a like a mouse pad type thing. It's like a play mat instead of the actual board. Sad thing is it doesn't fit in the box, so it's kind of a hit or miss which way you want to go on that one. But on here on the top we have our Fury trackers. The top one's for our hero character, the bottom is for the villain. And the characters are going to take turns. One player is going to be on here facing the villain directly, while the other players are in the background supporting them and helping with other objectives. You get bonuses as you go up, and you get into this final area. You can trigger your ultimate ability, which knocks the opponent basically out, and then the active player switches, or the villain can use their bash ability here. Once they get there, they'll knock out the hero and swap out to a new hero. Either way, everything resets and you go from there. Then you have your spots for your villain deck down here. Your villain health tracker, speed and damage bonuses. And then the active cards go here, the current villain card, as well as what the heroes have played for the turn. Next we have our player scrolls, and these act as your player boards. And these are temporary ones that were in the Kickstarter first editions of the game. They're actually mailing out the backers special ones that we unlocked that are a little bit higher quality. They're double layered thick, and they have holes basically where the cubes go here to keep them from getting bumped and slid around. But these work. Not sure why they made everything double-sided too. It's the exact same on both sides. So, but you have one for RWBY, Weiss, Blake, Yang, and Penny. Now onto our box. The insert in here, actually I could have done that before I took the scrolls out. They go in this little spot here. But the insert here is okay by game standards until you start adding in things. You can see here all of these are sleeved cards, and I have them divided. I used just spare scraps of foam core I had laying around to use as dividers, which work great until you start adding in all the cards from the expansion. This is just the base set that's in here right now, and it doesn't originally come like this either. I had a video somewhere and I don't know where it went. I'll try to put it in here if I can find it. Next thing we have here we should get into is the insert, and they tried, but they failed to make a very functional insert. And I like they have these segments over here where you can separate out your decks, so when you want to know what player or character you want, you can grab their stuff and go. And you're supposed to be able to separate them out so as you go through the campaign, you know what cards you bought and what you haven't. But this is just the base game right here right now. I've still got the Minion and Grim and Henchman cards down here, and there's a slot for the 3 main bosses that you have, the 5 girls, because you got Penny and the 4 girls from Team RWBY. There's 2 extra slots. Well, just with the expansion stuff that's out now, it already maxes all that out and there isn't enough room. So I'm probably going to end up getting rid of this anyway because it's not really going to be functional. You have to throw cards down in these bins down here. This is where the cards actually come from to start with. But there used to be a tray actually in this section, and it has little plastic dividers in it, which is great and all, but it doesn't even fit all the cards from the base game when they're not sleeved, let alone once you start adding everything else in. There just isn't enough room in there with the dividers the way they are for all the cards. So first thing I did was trim out that whole section and make it into just one big opening. And then all the cards will fit in here easily with dividers if you leave them unsleeved. If you sleeve them, you're going to have a little bit more room. These foam card dividers aren't going to work. And somebody on BGG sent me a really cool files they made for dividers. And I can show a couple images here. And I didn't get a chance to print those out yet, and they were worried about copyright issues, so they haven't actually uploaded them yet, but if they do make them available, I will put the link in the video description. But they'll help a lot for this, but chances are you're probably going to want to come up with some other storage solution. Even Rooster Teeth knows that. They already made deck boxes for the player characters and the villains, so there's that. But also the slots they give you to put the miniatures in, this game does come with miniatures, end up bending their weapons. Ruby's not too bad because I fixed her, but I ended up not putting her back in the slot. She's supposed to go that way. I put her in this way because it keeps it from bending. Who else had a problem? I think Blake's weapons were bent too because of that. So, not a great insert. It's functionable. The other one is the objective cards here. All of them will fit in there, including the ones from the expansions, until you sleeve them, and again, then they become too tall to sit there, so I may have to do something to get those to sit in there right. So that's the next thing we'll look at is our objective cards. And I think I separated them out. These are just the ones that come with the base game. So they have different difficulty levels. There's green ones are easy, yellow ones are medium, and then the red ones are difficult. And you use these in combination with the chosen villain to be, this is basically the scenario that's going on. In this one we have Roman's Henchman. Another one from the show from the very first episode is the Dust Heist. So now if you're playing with only 2 players, you might go with just Roman and the Dust Heist. If you're playing with 3 or 4 players, then you kick in another one and you play with the Dust Heist and Roman's Henchman, and so on. And you can mix and match these too. You can throw a hard one in or a medium one in to mix and match up the difficulty. They all have themes similar to episodes of the show or things that have happened, events. I don't think Finding Zwei ever happened on the show, but similar ideas though. You can see where they would fit in, and certain ones pertain to certain characters. not so much in the ones that came in the starter. You can mix and match, but like the White Fang ones generally are going to go with Adam. The ones that have Grim generally you're going to associate with Cinder. And of course, Roman's henchman, obviously you're going to associate with Roman. But again, you can mix and match to customize and make your own scenarios, which is kind of cool. And it gives you a little description up here of what's going on. The extra setup involved when using this objective. In this case, you're going to use the henchman Minion Deck. And then instructions on how to actually do the objective, what the requirements are, whatever, for doing things. In this case, at the beginning of every duel, 3 henchmen come into play. And then down here you have a victory point, or experience points you gain if you complete the mission, and the objective for the mission in this case is to defeat the villain. So if you're playing a campaign game, when you beat the main boss, if this is in play, you're going to gain an extra 5 experience points. And then these two are double-sided, but they're the exact same on both sides, so kind of a weird choice on their part. But a lot of variety there, a lot of different things. Some introduce new mechanics, some introduce new types of tokens. There's ones in here that actually have health bars for various things. This one's a really big Grim, I believe. And just enough there that's going to keep you playing for a while with the various combinations, especially if you're building your own campaigns and playing through the campaign mode. So we do have miniatures for each of our heroes. They're not super detailed. I don't know how well it'll come up on camera. They're not terrible, but they're not super detailed either. The bases are kind of oversized as well. And I've seen some people paint these up and they look halfway decent, so don't expect Cool Mini or not, or Games Workshop quality miniatures out of them, but they're definitely an improvement over your standard game pawns. Did have issues, like you can see Weiss's sword there. It's bent quite a bit. I straightened most of my figures out. Again, it's the terrible way this insert works. They have these little slots. I don't know if you can see that far away on the camera, but they kind of snap the base into these little slotted sections, and then you have to finagle the direction they're sitting in there because of all the stuff that sits on top of them. And we have Penny. Penny was actually unlocked as part of the Kickstarter stretch goals, but she's included in the base game for everyone, which is pretty cool. They did that with almost all of the stretch goals. And then Ruby. I do like the action poses that they're in. They're not just static, stationary poses. She's not attached to her base very well, though. But those are neat. We have a selection of really brightly colored cubes, which are nice. It doesn't come with any of these bags either. You have to provide your own storage for all of the tokens. We'll get to that when we get to those, but yeah, so very brightly colored cubes, and they stand out. These are used to mark various things. The red ones mark your aura, the green ones mark XP, and various other ones are used for different things throughout the game. I think the yellow is the speed bonuses for the villain. There's a purple one that's a damage bonus for a villain, and not exactly sure what the rest of them are for. They're all for various, keeping track of, like the one Grim and that one objective that had a hit point bar and so on. Oddly enough, I'm curious to see how these hold up. The clear cubes that I got in my Zaya game, for some reason, I think it has to do with the changes in temperature and humidity here. One day it's 90 degrees with 100% humidity, and then it's 20 degrees with, 10% humidity, and so on. And all of the ones for that game that were transparent like these have cracked, and I'm curious to see how these hold up. So far they're doing good. So we have a ton of tokens, and these two card slots here were originally where the decks were when you first get the game. They're wrapped up down there. And to make the insert function the way it's supposed to, if you leave like the henchmen and minions, the white bang guys, you leave those in there, and maybe the minor sub-bosses or something in the other one, that'll free up some space in this card section. if you don't want to mess with the insert like I did. But I ended up using them all for tokens. Now, in the base game, you have a couple extra empty slots here because there are miniatures for the villains as well. I did not pick that up. They're an extra add-on. They were a little pricey for my taste for the quality of the miniatures. It was just Roman, Adam, and Cinder. And I think they were like $20 for the 3 of them. If it had included the add-on sub-bosses, Emerald, Mercury, the no-named one that hasn't been named yet, and Neo was in there too, those would have made it a little more worth it, but as it is, 3 models for $20 plus shipping, I didn't really see where it was worth it, so I skipped out on those. So you have a couple extra spots in here, which I have tokens stashed in those as well, but you end up with a lot of these tokens, which don't come in bags, by the way. You have to supply your own bags for all these. So you have to find places to put all those if you're going to keep cards in here too. So, not a very well thought out insert from a company like Arcane Wonders who should know what they're doing in this. So in lieu of getting the actual villain models, you get this villain token, and this is what's going to go on the game board and slide along that Fury tracker to keep track of the rounds during combat. And it is kind of generic having just 1 token for all of them. They could have made 3 smaller tokens or even flipped the thing over and had somebody on each side. They could have done 2 tokens that way and then a generic blank one for the whoever else may come along. But it has all 3 of their pictures on there. And it just looks weird using the token on one and the models on the other. I will give it that. So next we have a pile of tokens here, and again, they don't come in these bags. These are all bags that I supplied from just stuff I had laying around. Those ones are force fields, shields, whatever they're called. They're for the one objective mission. These ones are enhancement tokens for another one of the missions, and they have different bonuses on the back. I don't know if you can see between the glare and the bag. I apologize if the bag's crinkled too much, but there are a lot of tokens to take all out. Next we have dust crystals for the dust heist. There's a set of these little campfire ones for the bandit camps, and on the back they have different things. You either get rested or you get attacked. And there's a stack for finding Zwei, and on the back of those there's Grim tokens. So you either spawn more minions or you find Zwei and he helps you out for the battle. And we have a couple more just random tokens for other missions. These are Junior's hat, I think, for a specific mission, and that's Emerald's Semblance token. You have a D10 for there's a couple objectives, I think, that require you to roll it. Disarming the bomb is one of them. Then we have these really cool 3D Semblance tokens. They're a little plastic. They have the character Semblance symbol on one side and they're blank on the other side. Now the rules say to keep them face up like this, and as you use your Semblance, flip them face down. We find that really hard to remember or keep track of. So what we've been doing with them is keeping them on our player scroll, and then when you use them, you take them off your player scroll, put them on the person or ability that you're using them on. That way you remember that you have the bonuses on that ability when it comes time to add up things, and you know it's off your scroll, it's been used. When you regain it, you put it back on your scroll to reset them. Very cool though. I might touch up just a little bit of paint on the actual symbols. The light's hitting them just right, you can see, but some of them are very difficult to see. So across the table you can't tell if somebody's face up or face down anyway, because you can't really see them now all that well, but very cool addition to the game. They could have just used a plastic or a cardboard token for them, and these are kind of neat. And our last little thing of tokens is a bunch of reminder tokens here. You have these ones that are +1 speed on one side, +1 damage on the other, and we actually find those are more annoying than anything else to try to remember to keep track of. We very rarely use them. I think we use them on the minions when a card comes out that gives them a bonus, because we tend to forget that. The other ones are actually wound markers, and these are going to keep track of damage on the minion cards. Most of them take between 1 to 4 or so damage before they die. So this helps you keep track of how much damage they have, and you know which ones are weak. And like I said, the speed damage ones we generally don't use just because they're kind of fiddly to mess with. But the damage tokens are kind of nice. I just wish there were more of them. And that's it for the actual items in the box. The rest is all just cards. So we're going to move this aside. And I'll lay out the different decks of cards. So each of the characters has a deck of cards. And there is black border ones and gold border ones. So the gold border ones you're going to set aside. The black border ones, you have one ultimate here, which you're also going to set aside. That you always have access to. Ruby's is red divide here. When you're on the main game board here and you get all the way to the end, to the ultimate section there, you can trigger this in any of your turns. It has interrupt, which means you don't have to worry about what the villain is doing. It automatically triggers when you use it. It bashes, which means it knocks the villain down, resets the duel for the next player. And you also gain this bonus. In this case, next duel, where we can draw up to 7 cards without discarding. Very nice. And then you also gain a XP bonus here. It also does a decent amount of damage, in her case 3 damage. So those you have access to all the time when you're in the center stage, which is what they call it when you're on the board there. You got to be in the ultimate zone in order to trigger them is all. Then the rest of these are your actual deck. And these are somewhat in order, which is kind of funny. I don't like both pens being together like that. But anyway, these are going to get shuffled up. And you draw from them, and this is going to be your deck, your hand for the game. You draw your cards out, and each of your cards have different abilities. So at the top here is the speed. You always want to have a higher speed than the villain, but you have to guess what the villain's is because you don't get to see theirs when you're deciding what card you want to use. We'll get to that when we get to the villain cards, but you have your speed up here. Higher the better. The difference is the lower speed usually do more damage. The higher speed usually does less damage. Higher speed have a better chance of hitting, lower speed don't. So the idea is to play the lowest speed card you have in your hand that you think you can hit with. If you waste your speed 10 cards against the villain's, speed 4, then when they get a speed 9, suddenly, you don't have anything that can beat it. So it's kind of a gambling game there. It's a little bit of guesswork, but there's also a mechanic to it as well, which we'll get to. These little symbols here are how much damage the attack does. Oh, and they also note down here whether it's ranged or melee. There's also special abilities like dash. Yang has punch, I think. Yeah, there's different ones of those that pertain to different special abilities down here. When you're the player in the center stage, which is on the board, you're going to pick one of these to play down. If a card has an exclamation point like this, that ability is going to trigger no matter what. If your speed is higher than the villain's, you deal your damage, you trigger your normal ability here. If the villain's is higher, your card's generally just ignored, so you're going to take damage. But if you have that exclamation point on there, that happens no matter what, which can be nice at times. Sometimes, if you don't have a chance to get in there and do anything, you can throw a card out there just to get these abilities for the next round. If you're a sideline player, which is somebody who's not in the center field, then you get a couple of different options you can do. You can take a rest turn, which will regenerate 1 point of aura for you and allow you to draw a card, or you can work on any of the objectives. In the case of the one right on top here, the henchmen, you can engage one of the henchmen that are in play. If you defeat them, you get an XP for it. It also helps to clear them out because eventually they're going to build up and overwhelm your players. Or you can choose to help out the hero that's on center stage. You can do that in 2 ways. The first way is to combo with them, in which case they have their card that's in play. You play your card alongside of it. When you combo, you go with the slowest speed. So you try to want to match, if you match those two, it's only going to go to 6, not a 7. So you match the lowest speed in the thing to the villain. So you have to keep that in mind. But when you combo, your abilities down here will go off if you're successful. And your damage is totaled. So the villain will take that much damage from both, which is nice. The trade-off is if the villain beats you, say they played the 10 and you got these 6s, everybody who comboed will take damage from that attack and any effects from that attack. So it's kind of a trade-off. You're gambling that you're going to win. It's an all or nothing type thing. The other option is to support. So instead of playing the card normally, you play it sideways. We actually just kind of tuck them under. So this little support line down here on the bottom shows. This bottom area is your support text. By supporting the main player, you're going to get 1 XP, which is nice. And this ability here will trigger, and there's various ones of those depending on what you're using. You can use them to boost up speed, boost speed and damage, and that's mostly what Ruby's does. But it's a balance on if you want to work on defeating the main villain, work on the side objectives, if you need to heal yourself or draw cards, and then if you want to combo in and do that extra damage or support and get those extra abilities. It's a very interesting balance in the way that that works out, and the more players there are, the more objectives there are to worry about too, so you're kind of balancing if you want to fight the villain or if you want to deal with the objectives. Usually you can wipe out the objectives in the first couple rounds of the duel, then help out for the rest. Generally towards the end is when your center stage hero is going to want the help because the villain starts getting those speed and damage bonuses. They start getting up into that bash area, and ideally you want to be in your ultimate before they get to their bash, which is not as easy as it sounds, and you need the player support there to do things like that. The rest of the cards here, these gold bordered ones, are marked down here tier 2, tier 3, and tier 4, and these get set off to the side. Throughout the course of the duel, you're going to be racking up those experience points on your scroll. At the end of each duel, when either the hero or the villain has been bashed or whatever, and everything resets, the center hero or center stage hero rotates, you're going to be able to upgrade. And you upgrade by paying the points cost here, in this case 5 of your XP. And then this being a tier 2 card, you have to swap out a tier 1 card, which is one of your standard black border cards. In order to get a tier 3 card, you pay the cost and you have to remove a tier 2 card. And so on with tier 4, pay the cost, you have to remove a tier 3. So it keeps you from saving up and jumping straight to the tier 4 cards. You have to work your way through the deck. And the way you do an upgrade is at the beginning of the round of the duel, you're going to draw up to your 6 cards. And then you're going to choose one of these cards out of your hand that you don't want anymore. Say we'll get rid of Spiral Rose, pay our 5 XP, and then we can add this to our hand in place of it. The card you cycle out, if it's a tier 1 card, gets removed from the game. If you're cycling out a tier 2 card for a tier 3, this goes back to the deck of cards so you can choose them again later. And generally these are going to be more powerful versions of cards you already have, or they're completely different and unique cards, which there are quite a few really cool ones in those upgrade decks. Over the course of the game, every time a duel ends, you're going to be able to option to go in there and upgrade some more cards. If you're playing a campaign, you get to keep those upgraded cards for the next battle when you go into it. So over the course of the game, your deck's going to become more and more customized and stronger to face those more heavy-hitting enemies and harder scenarios that are going to come up. There's a deck just like that for each of the 4 main characters. I'm not going to go through each one of them individually because if you're a fan of the show, which you probably are, if you're watching this, then you probably already know at least the basics about the main characters. So you have an idea of how their deck works. You don't need to know everything on them. We also have Penny in there. All 5 of those work pretty much the same. They have their own specialties. Keep in mind, depending on what you're fighting, you may want ranged attack, you may want melee attack, and there's a mix of those in there. I think each character has a mix of both, but certain ones are better in certain areas. Like Yang is definitely more suited for close combat, melee range. She does have a couple ranged attacks, but generally her attacks are melee based. Weiss has the cool glyphs that can be used to boost up the other players. RWBY can bestow her speed bonus on other people to give them bonuses, and so on. So there's different ways they can all combo together. On to the villain decks. The villain decks are really cool, unique mechanic in here, in that there's 4 different types of cards. You have your event cards, which are special things that happen, kind of change the rules of the game. Set those aside at the moment. Then you have, oh, that's convenient. Then you have aggressive stance, which means they're probably going to do a very fast, low damage attack, but you know it's going to be in the upper end. In this case, yeah, speed 8. We have our balanced, which is the mediocre. You're looking at probably a 6 in that area there. And that one's an 8. See, that's the thing. They get you on things like that because it only gives you an idea of where they're going to be. Then we have our subtle. These are usually our slow stuff, but they usually are very powerful or do strange things. In this case, yeah, it's only a speed 3, but it doubles the effects of his speed bonuses, and it gives him a speed bonus at the end of the round. So things like that can also be kind of unexpected. But anyway, you're going to shuffle all these together, and you can see that they all have the different backs as you go through. And then as the deck is sitting on the table, you know that the next card coming up is going to be a subtle card. So you can plan around that on what you think it's going to be and what speed you can play out of your hand. And the different characters definitely feel different and unique in their speed balance, the way their attacks form. Roman has a lot of sneaky stuff. He has a lot of things that bring henchmen into the game, even if you're not using henchmen, which is really nasty. And it's just a fun, very thematic thing playing each of the different villains. And once you've got these shuffled up, you actually divide them into equal piles. And then the event cards are going to be seated in between each of those piles. So they're going to show up at regular intervals throughout the course of the battle. These stay in play once they're revealed. See if we can find. He's got one that actually goes away. Some of them have the thing to get rid of them. And so in this case, you get playtime's over. Roman gains a +1 speed permanently. So this will actually go on the side of the board to remind you that he has that. This does not move the gauge. And it's permanent, so at the end of a duel, when everything resets, this stays in place, so he still has this +1 bonus. It also means you can go above. Normally the speed bonus on the little dial caps out at 4. This will actually bump it up to a 5. So something to keep in mind. And that one, again, is permanent until the end of the game. Then you have one like the Paladin Armor here. And the Paladin Armor's got a wall of text, but gives him +1 speed and +1 damage as long as it's in play. Again, they're in addition to the dials. And basically gives him an extra 10 hit points to his aura. You have to take out the 10 damage directly to this, then this gets destroyed. We were using the D10 as the counter. Once this is gone, he loses those bonuses and this gets discarded. Very, very powerful abilities for these. And there's a handful of them for each character. I think there's 4 in the base game for each of the villains. And then we have Adam's deck, and exactly the same concept as Torchwick's. You got your 4 event cards there that get mixed in, and your various stances. Adam's cards have a tendency to boost his speed in big increments. And he can get really bad to the point towards the end of a duel where you can't even hit him. So you really need to work with your combos and assists to boost up your speed if you want to have any chance of taking him on. And a lot of times, especially with him, it's better off to just take the hit than waste a fast card that might not. So if he's in an aggressive stance towards the end, he's got a bunch of bonuses. Even your 10 might not be enough to hit. So it might be worth throwing a lower card out there, one of those that has a bonus that goes off anyway, because you're going to take the hit anyway, get the bonus the next round, then play the 10 with the bonuses, which gives you a better chance of hitting that round. Something to keep in mind, he does take quite a bit more strategy when you go from facing Roman to facing Adam. It's a big change. And then we have Cinder here, and again, she's the same type of villain deck. Got your event cards in the back. And Cinder is massively powerful. While Adam is fast, she's damaging. Her attacks do insane amounts of damage, and she can reduce the amount of damage that you can do dramatically, making it really hard to fight her. I think Adam might be slightly harder because of the strategies needed, but she can actually start killing off players rather quickly, and it's a very, very tough fight, especially depending on the objectives that are in play. And the last thing we have here are our Minion decks. We'll start with Roman's Henchman here. And it's a very cool mechanic they have on these. They use the card backs as well. And on the bottom here you have their attrition damage, which if these remain in play at the end of a duel, if the villain is not bashed and the duel ends, so either they bash out the hero or they scroll off, you run out of turns, and the duel ends, they're going to do this attrition number down here to all the current players. So there's ones, twos, I think there's a couple threes. There might not be in the Henchman deck, but those can add up quickly, especially if there's 6 or 7 of these out. You got 3 of these a turn in the Roman's Henchman mission. And the other thing here is the minimal hit points. It will take at least 1 hit point in order to kill this guy. It will take at least 2 hit points to kill that guy. So when these come into play, they're face down, and you can only see this information on the back. That kind of gives you a rough estimate of what they are. So we're going to look at this guy here. We're going to say Yang's going to take a swing at him. So she's going to pick this guy. She's going to attack him with her Hammer Fist. In that case, you turn him over. In this case, they both have a speed of 8. Nothing would happen, but they both have an exclamation point. So these are going to go off. And in this case, Yang might, if she dealt damage last round, might get that +1 speed. Might boost her up to a 9. She might actually be able to hit him. On his case, when he's first revealed, deal 1 damage to each hero. So that's going to happen regardless. And then you resolve the fight. They have a damage up here. This is how much damage they do to the attacking player if they're not killed, or if they win the fight. So if he had an 8 and she had a 7, he would have done 1 damage to her. At the bottom here, you have their attrition damage again and their actual hit points. So their estimate on the back may not necessarily be the same as the actual on the front. Let's see if I can find somebody. There we go. So this guy here has got estimated 2 on the back. You attack him, you hit him for 2 hit points. You beat his 7, say. You hit him for 2. Oh, look, he's actually got 3. So he's still alive. He'll stay there face up along with the face down guys. Now you know that you have to beat that 7, which makes it a little easier to take out. But you have to do the total hit points in order to kill them off and get rid of them. So it's an interesting mechanic. I like the way it works. Some people complain about the estimated hit points because you get a lot of 1 for 1s there. There's a 1 for 2. It says 1 on the one side. He actually has 2. I like it because you're not quite sure if you're going to be able to take them out or not. It's kind of it's a part of that guessing game that you're working on. We also have a White Fang deck, and these guys are Adam's little minions. And there's a variety of types in there and abilities they can do. So next we have is our Grim deck here, and these are probably the most unique of all the Minion decks because there are different types. Let me start here. You have an Ursa. There's a, what do they call those things? I don't know what that's called. A Goliath. They're kind of the elephant guys. We have a Griffin and a Beowulf. And if we look at them, each one of them has different abilities based on what they are. The Beowulf has melee attacks. The Griffin is actually a flying creature, so he can only be hit by ranged attacks. The Goliaths are usually really big and burly and have a lot of hit points. And the Ursa are in the middle. And you got to take into consideration what is down in the Griffins actually say flying right on them. So you have to take that into consideration when they're down and out on what you're going to attack based on the strength of the Grim, so you know there might be some that you might not be able to kill off, like a Goliath. You're probably not going to kill off with a 3 attack. Even though they have 3, they may have 4 hit points or more, so you have to keep that in mind. And that's everything that was in the box. There you can see the hole we cut in there to get rid of that part of the insert that was keeping us from getting all the cards in there. And that's a look at everything that comes in the box for RWBY Combat Evolved. We've played a handful of games so far. I really like the way it works. It does take a bit to explain. Usually by the second game, if people are right on it and they've already figured it out. Judging what speed cards to play based on the stance of your opponent and which opponent you're playing too takes a little getting used to, because you have to learn. Like the one card that we looked at there where it was a balanced attack and still had a speed 8. So you kind of got to judge a few games to get the hang of what's what in there and what's available. The variety in the scenarios and the fact that you can mix and match multiple ones of them to change up the game is kind of cool. I wish there were more than 3 villains, but I'm not sure who else you could throw in there as a big bad villain. Maybe Salem, but she might be too powerful. And that's always something that could come in an expansion as well. Maybe some more of the minor villains. Definitely want to see new teams added. I love Team RWBY, but I'm also a big fan of Juniper. I like Coco as my favorite character. And Velvet, of course. Her whole team's actually kind of cool. And would love to see them as optional characters in future expansions. But for now, if this is all they go with, it's still a fun, playable game. There's plenty here. There's several mini expansions already available. I'm going to do a video on the stuff from all the available mini expansions and the Kickstarter stuff. And I'll lump them all into one. And overall, though, it's a great game. I think the Kickstarter exclusives, there were only 3 new mission objective cards. So if you didn't get in on the Kickstarter, it's not like a lot of games where they had a ton of exclusive content and you're screwed if you weren't there for the Kickstarter. You're going to miss out on a couple missions, which you can probably find online and print and play. Not going to say that's an endorsement to do so, but if you're looking to get into the game and you missed the Kickstarter, you might be able to do that. Overall, though, the game is a lot of fun if you're a fan of the show. If you're not a fan of the show, it's hit or miss. It depends on what you're looking for in a game. The way the turn sequence is broken up seems weird at first, but after you've played a few rounds, it's really fast-paced, and the game plays a lot quicker than I thought it would be. And the fact that one player's center stage and the others are kind of off to the side background. Originally, I thought that was going to suck, be a lot of downtime, but it's not. The turns still go at the same rate, whether you're in the middle or not. The difference is if you're in the middle on the center stage, you're fighting the villain directly, and you're the first player to play out there. If you're on the sidelines, then you have more options to combo with the player, to assist the player, to fight the minions, to work on the objectives, whatever's the current thing that's going on. You got a lot more options. You can also rest to draw extra cards and so on. The game really comes down to a game of hand management. At the beginning of each duel, you're going to draw 6 cards. Then there's other cards that allow you to draw cards. I think Weiss's Semblance allows her to draw a card, and there's different things like that. Penny has a couple that let you draw extra cards. But other than that, you're pretty much stuck with those 6 cards for the duel. And if you run out of cards, you, as the active player, you actually end that round of the duel. So you really have to pick and choose what you're going to do throughout the course of the duel, so that towards the end you don't get stuck with some really low, crappy cards and not have anything you can do. And that's the real key, is the hand management. And once you learn to not always go for your fastest attack. Sometimes it pays to play a 6, or something even lower if you've got a bonus from here or there, or somebody can assist you to boost that bonus. And some of the lower cards are definitely the more powerful cards too. I think RWBY has a 4, I think, which is one of her most powerful cards. But you need these other people to boost it up or to lower the villain down to make that 4 actually hit. Overall, though, the game really catches the feel of the show. You're doing battle with the minion over here, or with the villain over here. They're doing battle with secondary background characters over here. You're switching in and out. The whole bash mechanic, as they put it, is think of the character being knocked a block away from the fight by some huge, powerful hit. Take some time to run back, so in the meantime, the next closest hero will jump in and start fighting them. And that mechanic fits really well with the game, too. Keeps things flowing, and I really like the way everything works. Some of the tokens are a little fiddly, but As I said, we don't even use the speed bonus things. Most of the bonuses, at least for the heroes, only last per turn anyway. It's really easy to keep track of. For the minions and things that are out, you may want to use the speed and damage bonuses just to keep track, put them on the cards. But other than that, I like everything. Wish the villain miniatures were a little more affordable because I would have loved to have gotten them to have a full set. It's something I may pick up later, hoping they have a sale around the holidays. But for now, I'm happy with everything the way it is, and I think the amount of variety in the objectives and the fact that you can mix and match them will keep the game around and fresh for quite a while. I do wish there were more than 3 villains. Eventually, you're going to learn the basics of their decks. They become very predictable. There is a pack out. It was included for the Kickstarter people as stretch goals. It's available to buy for people who weren't in the Kickstarter. That adds, I think, another 10 cards to each of their decks. Adds a new event. A little bit more variety in there. It also adds cards to the upgrade decks for each of the main characters, too. So that's kind of cool. That adds more variety still. There's also the three sub-bosses. Yeah, 3 different sub-bosses you can get that, again, add more variety. The sub-bosses are kind of a cool thing. They weren't actually included in the original game. They're in the original rulebook, but they're one of the new objective types. Instead of, say, minions, you get a sub-boss which has a smaller version of like a villain deck, and you have to, one of your sideline players has to engage them each turn, or they start stacking up nasty things as well. Anyway, that's going to wrap it up for our look at RWBY. As I said, if you're a fan of RWBY, you're definitely going to enjoy it. If you're a fan of hand management strategy games, you're probably going to enjoy at least a few playthroughs of different combinations of scenarios. It may get old for you if you're not a fan of the RWBY franchise. But being able to take control of one of your favorite characters from the show and do battle with some of the iconic villains, the game really captures that well. And I'm glad I picked it up. Anyway, as always, thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.